The UCI Mountain Bike World Cup is finally in full swing, with the world's best downhill riders joining the XC Racer Boys in Lenzerheide this past week for some record-breaking and action-packed racing. But of course, what we and you are most interested in is the newest tech innovations scattered up and down the pit lane. The World Cup circuit is perfect for brands looking to test their latest and greatest under the pedals of superhuman bike handlers and racing stakes alike. We've got the juicy details on Nino Schurter's winning Scott Spark, decked out in prototype electronic RockShox suspension, more fresh rubber that you can shake a carbon wheel at, and a host of other tech for you to digest. So without any further ado, let's get straight into the latest XC tech from the second round of the UCI Cross Country Mountain Bike World Cup. We'll start with the big one, which is of course the true greatest of all time, Nino Schurter finally stepping ahead of Julian Absalon as the most successful XCO World Cup winner of all time, taking a record-breaking 34th World Cup victory aboard a truly stunning Scott Spark. Scott revealed Nino's bike back in April, and at the time it looked pretty standard fare for a top-level World Cup racer, aside from the obviously pretty special paint job. What most people missed was that the RockShox Sid fork was actually a prototype, with a new, more sculpted crown and steerer hiding in plain sight. We've seen the same crown and steerer under other riders both in Novo Mesto at the first round and Lenzerheide, which we'll cover later. But for Nino's home race, his Scott SRAM team took it one step further. It has long been rumoured, but Nino rode a prototype flight attendant equipped version of the new Sid to his record-breaking victory. For those who aren't familiar with Flight Attendant, it's RockShox's electronically controlled system that made its debut in 2021 on the brand's trail and enduro suspension line, including the Zeb fork and Super Deluxe shocks. Now with both a first sighting and a first win for the technology in the world of XC racing, the new Flight Attendant equipped Sid is surely pretty close to production. We're thinking it must be, given RockShox even went the bother of fitting it with Flight Attendant decals. This is instead of the white black box logos seen on the prototype standard Sid forks up and down the pit lane, like those found on the bikes of Canyon Collective riders Luana Lecomte and Luca Schwarzbauer. The Spark's hidden shock design means nobody really knows what's hidden away inside the sleek frame. Given the lack of Scott's usual twin-lock remote on the handlebar and the inclusion of a regular reverb axis dropper post in its place though, it's not hard to guess that there's a Flight Attendant equipped RockShox shock hidden inside the frame. Flight Attendant uses SRAM's axis batteries to operate, so presumably with two axis batteries for the suspension, one each for the Eagle transmission drivetrain and axis dropper post, two CR2032 batteries for the axis controllers, and a battery for the Quark chainring power meter, and a battery for Nino's computer. There are a total of at least 8 different batteries on his bike. That's a lot of batteries to charge. Do you think electronics in mountain biking have gone too far? Is too much of this tech a bad thing for the sport? Be sure to let us know in the comments, we'd love to know what you think. There are a few more features on Nino's bike that caught our eye. Unlike the preview bike that Scott showed to the world back in April, Nino was seemingly using Silverton 1.0S carbon wheels from Scott house brand Syncross and not the single-piece Silverton SL wheels in the press release. The 1.0S wheels are around 70 grams heavier according to Scott, but both have a 30mm internal width to suit the wide 2.4-inch rubber that Nino runs. Could it be that the regular carbon wheels offer a touch more compliance and grip that makes it worth the small weight penalty? It's certainly interesting, and we'll keep an eye out to see what Nino uses in the upcoming rounds, starting in Leogang next weekend. Wrapped around those wheels when we photographed the bike pre-race were Maxxis Aspen tyres in a pretty standard 120 TPI XOTR casing. For the race though, Nino did switch to the faster rolling Maxxis Aspen ST, presumably with the pro-only 170 TPI casing seen elsewhere in the pits. The whole package obviously worked pretty well as Nino took the win by 15 seconds over Cannondale factory racing South African powerhouse Alan Hatherley. Speaking of Hatherley and Cannondale, that brings us neatly onto the first of several prototype tyres doing the rounds in Lenzerheide. Hatherley and others on the Cannondale team were using an almost completely unmarked Schwalbe first ride tyre with a brand new tread pattern. The tread itself features alternating rows of small blocky knobs with a slightly more aggressive side knob to give more grip in the corners. Unlike the more gravity-focused tyres we've seen from Schwalbe recently, which have the name hot patches sharpened out to try and mask their identity, these have no markings whatsoever, so who knows what they'll end up being called. What we do know though is that alongside the first ride logo, which marked this out as one of the brand's prototypes, were Schwalbe's Telltale Addict speed tags and the bronze coloured Super Race casing. So you can bet that along with that fast rolling tread, they're going to zip along pretty rapidly. They certainly didn't seem to hold Hatherley back, as he mounted an awesome recovery ride from the lower reaches of the top 10 to finish second, beating Jordan Sarrou and Thomas Griot into third and fourth places respectively. A tyre that seems to have really flown under the radar is the return of the Specialized captain. Named after Specialized legend Ned Overend, the captain first appeared at the turn of the last decade in 2010, but has been oddly absent from their range for a number of years. It looks to be making a comeback though, looking rather closer to production than the aforementioned Schwalbe. Like its German counterpart, the new captain features a low-profile, tightly spaced, blocky tread pattern with chunkier side knobs for cornering grip, and uses the brand's T11/T5 dual compound design for better speed in a straight line and improved grip when leant over. We don't know what width the Specialized riders were running, but given the trends elsewhere, it's likely to be in the 2.3 to 2.4 inch range. We've asked Specialized for more details, so stay tuned to the channel and BikeRadar.com for more info when we have it. Nino's Flight Attendant equipped Spark may have hogged the limelight, but there was plenty of other suspension tech to be found elsewhere in the pits. As previously mentioned, new versions of the RockShox SID appeared on a number of bikes in both the men's and women's fields. They're easy to spot thanks to the black box decals and the more sculpted crown. We don't have any definite details, but the glossy and matte finish suggests the crown might be forged and then machined to reduced weight. They also seem to be using a new version of RockShox Charger Race Day damper, which, given the standard naming convention, we guess will be called the Charger Race Day 2. Naturally, the new forks were hooked up to a remote lockout, with both the Canyon Collective and Trek Factory racing teams using a new, slimmer version of RockShox Twistlock remotes. I'm a big fan of Twistlock, as it seems to be a lot more intuitive to use than more traditional remotes alongside the now almost mandatory dropper post levers. Weight saving is always key, and Trek's mechanics took this to the extreme by fitting no-con style multi-piece cable outers to their riders' bikes to save a few grams over traditional outer cables. Every little helps, as they say. Elsewhere in the pits, there was more prototype suspension in the form of a new Manitou XC fork. The brand recently revamped the Matic Trail fork, and it seems the existing R7 could be in line for a similar treatment. The stanchions look to be bigger than the current R7's 32mm, but the new fork does keep the polished silver crown, steerer and the brand's signature reverse arch design. I have to say I love the black and white camouflage on the lowers, and I was very impressed with Manitou's bigger Mezza fork during our recent Enduro fork group test. I'll be keen to spend time on this new fork if and when they get released, so stay tuned for more in the coming months. Another set of bouncers that have thoroughly impressed me recently is the new Öhlins XC fork and shock. Jordan Sarrou piloted the new suspension to a strong third place finish, just running out of steam towards the end of the race. I was super impressed with my initial ride on the new Öhlins XC fork and shock. They are super supple with very controlled travel and felt very capable, especially given their cross-country intentions. If you haven't already, be sure to toddle on over to the first ride video with the link in the description. We also spotted them on a BMC training bike that presumably belonged to someone else in the team, as it was running Maxxis Aspen tyres, not the Pirelli rubber used by Sarrou and teammate Tito and Corrod. The Aspens were marked up with the Maxxis Test Pilot hot patch, as well as being the Pro-only 170 TPI variant. They even had the weight Tipex onto the sidewall, which pleases my inner weight really greatly. Definitely one for the true gram counters out there. Last but by no means least is Henrique Avancini's Caloi full suspension bike, sporting some very interesting hoops. His 9-volt Yarrow SL wheels have a fairly standard 30mm internal width, but the spokes are made by American company Bird from Dyneema Fabric. Yes, you heard that right, the spokes are made from fabric, not metal. They are said to be 15 times stronger than steel spokes, yet weigh around 150 to 200 grams less for a complete set on a pair of wheels. Light and strong. Is that the perfect XC combo? The fabric can also be coloured with a special dye, so along with the normal white colour, Henrique had a blue and red spoke either side of his tubeless valves. A nice little touch there for the Brazilian legend. Would you trust a set of fabric spokes on your wheels, or are you wedded to good old steel spokes? Let me know in the comments, as I would genuinely love to know, and I am dying to give them a try. That's not a pun about the colour, by the way. So that's a wrap on the latest XC tech from the Lenzerheide World Cup. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming downhill tech video from the Swiss hillside, presented by our very own super shredders Will Soph and Rob Weaver. As always, let us know what your favourite bit of tech from the weekend was, and if you haven't got enough cross-country action, then check out this video to fill your tech coffers.